Okay, so we've multiplied and simplified rational expressions, and today, in assignment number 7, we're going to be adding and subtracting rational expressions. Just like adding and subtracting fractions, but instead of numbers in the fractions, there's going to be expressions. So let's just go ahead and start with something that we should know, but maybe we need a little bit of a review on. 2/3 plus a half. We need to get a common denominator here. And so our common denominator is going to be 6 for both of them. I multiply 3 times 2 to get 6, so 2 times 2, that's 4 6. And then 2 times 3 is 6, so 1 times 3 is 3, and so that's 7 6. Let's just change that. Instead of working with specific numbers, let's change that to variables and just take a step closer to where we're going with this. I need a common denominator, but my common denominator is going to be b times d. And b times d. I multiply b times d, and so I'm going to multiply a times d. So this is going to be a times d over bd. Here I have to multiply this one by b, so I'm going to multiply the c times b. And so this is going to be bc over bd. Now when I add them together, my common denominator is b times d, but my numerator is going to be ad plus bc. It doesn't look simple, but that would be my answer when I add and subtract those. Again, I'm still going to have restrictions. B times d could not be 0, which means b cannot be 0, and d could not be 0, because those are going to be restrictions on those variables. So let's take a look at one that's a little bit more complicated than that. I want to subtract these, but if I'm going to subtract those, I'm going to need a common denominator here. And so I'm going to first factor the one on the left, the x squared minus 2x minus 3. It's going to be x times x gives me x squared. And then if I go minus 3 and positive 1, then I will have negative 3x plus 1x, which gives me negative 2x in the middle. Now if I factor the one on the right, I'm going to factor a 4 out, and 4 times x plus 1 gives me 4x plus 4. And so I want to get a common denominator for both of these. My common denominator is going to have, I have an x plus 1 in both of them. I'm going to need an x plus 3 because I have it in the one on the left, and I'm going to need a 4 because I have it on the one on the right. And so my common denominator for both of these is going to be x plus 1 times x minus 3 times 4, because that's what they all share. And so I'm going to multiply this left fraction here. I need to multiply it by a 4 because that's the only thing that I need in the denominator that I don't already have. I have the x minus 3 down here. I have the x plus 1 down here, but what I don't have is the 4. So if I multiply this by 4, the denominator is good, but then I'm going to have to multiply the numerator by 4. 4 times 2x is simply 8x. Then I'm going to subtract my other fraction, but in this other fraction I have the 4 already, and I have the x plus 1 already. What I don't have is the x minus 3. So I'm going to have to multiply the denominator by x minus 3, so I have it down here, but that means I'm going to have to multiply the numerator by the same thing, x minus 3. And when I do that, I'll have 3x minus 9. And so now when I subtract these, my common denominator is going to stay common. I'm just going to write it a little bit differently. I'm going to keep it in factored form. This is x plus 1 times x minus 3. And my numerator is going to be 8x minus this whole expression. So it's going to be 8x minus 3x, but if I take this negative x and distribute it, it's going to be plus 9. So 8x minus 3x is 5x, and then I have plus 9. And I can't factor that anymore. Sometimes you can get to this point and you can factor this again and then maybe factor something out from the denominator. But this is my final answer here. And again, I do have restrictions. X cannot equal negative 1 and x cannot equal 3. Because if it is, then I have a denominator that's equal to 0, and I'm dividing by 0, which is undefined. And so my final answer is 5x plus 9 times over 4 times x plus 1 times x minus 3. All right, so I'm going to have to erase some of this because I got a little bit too excited here. So what I'm going to do is get rid of this so that we have room for our next one. And so now what I'm going to be doing is the same thing that I did before. I'm going to be subtracting some things together here. I'm going to start with trying to figure out what the common denominator is going to be. So I'm going to factor this first. Looks like maybe before I do that, maybe I should factor a 3 out. And so I'm going to go ahead and factor a 3 out of here first. That's going to give me x squared minus 3x plus 2. Then I have the 3, but then I'll have x times x gives me the x squared. And it looks like if I go minus 2 and minus 1, negative 2 times negative 1 gives me positive 2, but negative 2x and a positive 1x, or a negative 1x, gives me negative 3x. So the factors that make up this denominator are 3 times x minus 2 times x minus 1. So let's factor now this one. Again, I'm going to factor a 3 out. That's going to leave me with x squared plus x minus 2. So I'll have the 3 outside, but then I will have x times x. That gives me the x squared. And it looks like I'm going to go with a positive 2 and a negative 1. Because positive 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2, which is what I need here. But then a 2x minus 1x gives me a positive x in the middle. So here are my two denominators. I want to pull out what they have in common. And so what they're going to have in common here is the 3. Or not what they have in common, but what they share. I have an x minus 2. I need the x minus 2 for this one. I also need an x minus 1 for the left, but I'm going to add anything to this denominator from the right side that I don't already have. I have the 3 already, I have the x minus 1 already, but what I don't have is the x plus 2. So this is going to be my common denominator. Then I'm going to, I want to make sure that this is common. So what I'm going to have to add a factor to the left fraction. And the factor that I'm going to have to multiply by is the x plus 2, because that's the only one that I have down here, but I don't have up here. But if I multiply this by x plus 2, I'm going to multiply the numerator by x plus 2. That's going to give me a numerator of x squared plus 2x minus whatever the other denominators or numerator is going to be. And so in the right fraction, I have the 3 already, I have the x minus 2, and I have the x minus 1, but what I don't have is the x minus 2. So I'd have to multiply this by x minus 2, which means I'd have to multiply this numerator here by x minus 2 also. So if I do that, I'm going to FOIL this. I'm going to have 2x times x is 2x squared. That's a squared there. 2x times negative 2 is negative 4x. 1 times x is positive x. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Well, that's going to give me, if I simplify it, 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. So I'm going to be subtracting these, and so I'm going to take this negative 1 and distribute it to all three of these terms. So I'm going to have x squared plus 2x on the left, but then minus 2x squared plus 3x plus 2 on the right. And so then if I simplify this, x squared minus 2x squared is negative x squared. 2x plus 3x is plus 5x. And then plus the 2. And now if I could, I would try to put this in factored form, because maybe one of the factors of this polynomial on the numerator is either the x minus 2, the x minus 1, or the x plus 2. But I don't think I can factor what I have in the numerator. My final answer is going to look like this. And there are restrictions. X cannot equal 2, x cannot equal 1, and x cannot equal negative 2. These are the type of things that we're working on for our homework assignment tonight. It's going to take some practice, but as you go through this, do the best you can, and we'll go over questions that you have tomorrow in class. And again, I'm stopping a little bit too early here. Let's do these last two problems, and then we'll stop the video. So again, I'm going to add these together. So here I'm going to factor the denominator. The denominator is going to be x times x is x squared. If I go minus 6 and plus 2, that's what my factors are. In the one on the right, I'm going to factor a 4 out. That's going to give me 4 times x plus 2. So my common denominator is going to be 4. and then I'm going to have an x minus 6 and an x plus 2. So what don't I have here? Well, I don't have the 4. So I'm going to multiply the 1 times the 4. That's going to give me 4. I'm going to add to that this numerator, but I don't have the x minus 6. So I'm going to multiply the denominator by x minus 6. That means I'm going to multiply the numerator by x minus 6. And if I distribute that, it's going to be plus 3x squared and then minus 18x. So this is going to be 3x squared minus 18x plus 4. I don't believe I'll be able to factor the 3x squared minus 18x plus 4. Let me just try it here real quick. 3x times x gives me 3x squared. I can put a 2 and a 2, but a 2 and a 2 is not going to give me 18. I can go a negative 4 and a negative 1, but that's not going to give me 18 either. So yeah, I can't factor this. So this is going to be my final answer. Restrictions are going to be that x cannot equal 6 and x cannot equal negative 2. All right. So last question here. Some of the problems on your homework, they want you to find the least common multiple. And so the least common multiple is very similar to the least common denominator. That's really what a common denominator is, the least common multiple. And so it's kind of like this is the denominator and this is the denominator. I want to figure out what they have in common. I'm going to start by factoring a 3 out of the one on the left. That's going to give me x squared plus 3x minus 10. And if I can continue to factor this, I'm going to have x times x. That gives me x squared. And then looks like a positive 5 and a negative 2, because 5 times negative 2 gives me negative 10. And 5x minus 2x is 3x. Then over here on the one on the right, I'm going to factor a 6 out, and that's going to give me x plus 5. So what do I have in common here? I could actually take this 3 or this 6 here and make it 2 times 3. And so I'm going to have a 2 times a 3 times the x plus 5. I need to put down all the factors here. And then put any factors from this list that I don't already have. Well, I have the 3, I have the 5, what I don't have is the x minus 2. And so the least common multiple, I'm going to leave it in factored form, would look like this. Now I could write this as 6 times x squared. This is going to be plus 5x minus 2x minus 10, which is going to be 6 times x squared plus 3x minus 10. Which is going to be 6x squared plus 18x minus 60. So if I wanted to write it in a standard form, it would look like this, but you can go ahead and leave it in factored form too, and that would be the least common multiple. So that's what we're doing on our homework, and we'll go over questions that you have tomorrow in class.